Morning, everybody. We're going to have another talk here. I hope people gravitate to it because it's real, credible, and verifiable. We can't ignore these things. This is for absolutely Perry Bellegarde, who's currently the national chief, whomever is going to take over that role in the coming weeks, as well as government officials. Canadians, again and again, we're going to go through this presentation and why it's so important for everybody, because people aren't getting it and nobody's sharing it, which means we're going to stay as the cuckold country of the world. We're laughed at. Literally, Canada is laughed at right across the world. Most countries look at us now as a complete joke. So Justin Trudeau, and this is in full support of opposition, Jagmeet Singh, Aaron O'Toole. Aaron O'Toole's been banging on pots and pans for the last year. Take on China. Even though while he was in government and in a majority, both majority and minority, as one of Stephen Harper's main contributors in military at least, Aaron O'Toole supported everything they did and passed with China. Massive undertaking in Canada. Most Canadians didn't want. They signed FIPA, 31-year agreement with China. Most Canadians didn't want that. Harper didn't care. And neither did Aaron O'Toole. Aaron O'Toole fully endorsed that. Fully endorsed it. But for Perry Bellegarde and the next national chief for First Nations, you have to understand in 1960, Russia went forward with the resolution in the UNSC, presented absolutely to the entire General Assembly, where it won absolute binding world law status. None of the P5 vetoed it. They all stayed silent and allowed that to go through. What is decolonization? World War II was a war of colonizers, colonizing countries. I'm going to break this down for everybody. There are 7. I'm going to try and get them all here this time and correctly. Germany. You should all know of Germany, Nazi Germany. They went through into Africa, exploited many African countries, presented their will, their culture, their military authority. UK, the biggest of all colonizers, the most rampant worldwide, many human rights atrocities associated with the United Kingdom, okay? France, 3rd largest colonizer in the entire world. Massive. They're the number 3. Then you have Spain, which at one point was the biggest. Then they went into a 4th place. They were a massive human rights atrocity. Just these countries all, just like Germany, Nazi Germany, all have serious human rights atrocities. That during that period, which was the League of Nations, all those countries were welcome to do that against anybody they wanted, in the name of the divine power of the politician or the monarch. Japan, huge colonizer of Asia. Extreme history, a lot of Western culture has no idea. They didn't just get hit with atomic bombs for no reason. It had to be done because of how bad the human rights abuses were. A lot of people don't know what happened to China. They don't know what the Japanese did to China and other major members of the UN who are in that Southeast Asia world. Japan did that. Major Asian colonizer. Massive human rights atrocities. We have the Portuguese, first ever massive, the first of the first colonizers. They went throughout the world. They absolutely did that for a number of hundreds of years. They're the ones who taught everybody else how to colonize, how to do gross human rights atrocities. Denmark went out there, colonized, tiny little country island. They went out there, 5 continents. They have extreme human rights abuses that actually led to modern slavery. A lot of what Spain, Portugal, and Denmark did led absolutely to the southern states of the USA. You can all look this up. It's all true. It's verifiable. There was the American War with the Spanish and the Mexican War. You can look at all that. There's major wars that Americans undertook. Major. They fought five world colonials who had done atrocities of the American indigenous, South American indigenous. The list goes on and on. Now, this isn't about finger pointing as the League of Nations came to an end. We hit World War II, the war that ended all wars, and it was said, and I repeat, again, Canadians, you should know this, whether you didn't get learned in school or not, never again. Anyone who reads about World War II, the Allies, the victorious Allies, which were United States, not a colonizer, very, very extremely limited, dipped their toes in that water, very limited, way back during the time of League of Nations. And America, we the people of America, and their strong constitution, said no. And you know what? The people voted, both Democrats and Republicans, a very, very long time ago, America first, no to colonization. And they removed themselves from very, very limited dipping their toes, like only a few countries, a couple island states, and then they quickly removed them. They didn't stay very long. They started that, and then it was shut down by we the people, voted unanimously, presented by the Republicans in power. They ended it. They said no to the League of Nations. They never joined. UK continued. It was really ultimately an elite white man's world. That was the League of Nations. If you weren't white and in a kind of monarch or first-class citizenry, you didn't count. Absolutely, and right across the world, anyone who wasn't white was not included in any kind of universal charter, let alone constitution for the entire world. That, if you weren't white, you weren't right. That's where it all comes from, everybody. The 7 colonizers, Latin and full English. You see the French there too. That's reality. Denmark, Germany, that's the birth of Germany. League of Nations, that's reality. World War I, then World War II, and it was at an end because colonizers were fighting colonizers to destroy the world. That's exactly what was going on. The reason why I tagged Perry Bellegarde is countries who never ever participated in any of that world were China, were Russia, and the United States of America. They created the UN. UK and France wanted to have that same power they had in League of Nations and of course the power over Europe. And the Allies, this includes China, this includes Russia, this includes USA, all said, here's the charter, you sign it, you give up all colonization and all of its evil. The world will never go like that. We're ending all racial, sex, race, language. We're cementing religion. You guys can't continue like this anymore in the world. Now, we will let you have that power because there's things of the League of Nations that came across into the new UN. It was all negotiated, and it was done during World War II. It's why there was such a late entrance of Russia and USA and absolutely China. They didn't get involved until these things were ratified and agreed to. This is reality, everybody. People keep trying to ignore it, especially because of the Canadian educational system and because of Canada's reluctance to leave a system called the League of Nations that is outlawed, ended, terminated today. Now, Canada will pull out the League of Nation overlaps, but understand, everybody, decolonization has come and gone long, long time ago. First was 1945's UN Charter, binding world law on every country. Canada slipped through the cracks. Small country, quiet, been very, very meticulously sliding through. The Allies looked at it. King George did his work. Russia, USA, and China never came back to look at the actual terms and definitions. They looked as those terms and definitions apply in absolutely their legal dictionaries that are worldwide legal dictionaries. When you look at the terms and definitions of the Crown embedments in Canada in the Canadian Oxford Dictionary, it doesn't match the translated definitions in those superpower country definitions. They're very similar. All three of those countries are very similar. But Canada, completely opposite. Goes back again to the League of Nations. You can even look at Oxford versus Canadian Oxford Dictionary. And Houston, we got a problem here. This is the problem with Canada. And then they use the Queen and the Queen's name. In the Queen's name, we do this, we do that. That system's gone. It's been gone since 1952. Absolutely. It was already getting worked out from the 30s onward, but the physical work, the physical and absolute, was done by none other than King George when he made it to Canada in his list of countries he had to decolonize. Physically go and decolonize. And he did. He did all of that with Canada. He passed away, and Canada's politicians picked up the crown for themselves. They never amended the 1867 Constitution. Pierre Elliott Trudeau in 1982 and the Charter and the amending of Canada's Constitution refused to address the colonialism, refused to remove any of the League of Nations colonial embedments, absolutely divinity of the politician, which is crown. They use the name of Queen Elizabeth II. Oh, it's all ceremonial. But what's not ceremonial is Prime Minister, Governor General, and Lieutenant Governor. Absolute, full, autocratic League of Nations colonial crown power that exists and exists only for the politicians. This is why Indigenous have been so badly genocided all the way up till today, and it will continue. Perry Bellegarde, it's never going away. Now Russia came forward in 1960, 1514 with the Convention of Decolonization. It's world-binding law. UK, France, USA stepped aside and said, go ahead, Russia, let's see what the world thinks. And resoundingly, the world voted in favor of Russia's resolution. You know what happened? It became binding world law. None of them vetoed it. They abstained, and they allowed the rest of the UN states, the General Assembly, to have at her. And resoundingly, the world voted, let's end it, including Canada. Just so you all know, including Canada. So now we're going to get into UNDRIP 2021 by none other than the Trudeau government, which is an overlap of assimilation, again, with fancy, colorful language. UNDRIP 2021 in Canada is a non-binding agreement. I'm going to go through this for all of you, absolutely, where Russia is right now, today, and what they are handing publicly to each and every one of you. It's been published. It's out 14 hours. I can get the link, but I have to answer it. So this letter that I need to finish today for Perry, well, today, tomorrow, it's the weekend. I guess it won't matter. He won't get it till Monday anyway. But the reality is, Russia is saying this. Indigenous, which is the First Nations of Canada, he talks of that Russia is always about the whole world. They take international law very seriously. Russia is one country. They cross their T's, dot their I's. They don't make exceptions, excuses. They're very tight that way. Very analytical, a very analytical people. Most extreme analytical of all the P5. They look at everything, and as it applies to the whole world, because that's in their constitution, and it's their power as an ally they take very seriously. Regardless of propaganda you hear or decisions Russia makes, I don't agree with everything Russia does. I don't like an autocratic one-party system federally, but that's not what this post is about. This post is about what Russia has decided just in the last 14 hours, what's been presented to me, and what I'm reading and I understand, and what First Nations, Perry, Bellegarde, you're next coming up. Whomever the First Nation, whether that's Perry or a senator, are going to ascend to Governor General, understand Crown-embedded colonialism. Even if you're First Nations and you ascend to these positions under the Crown of Canada, under Canada's political system, you're going to take UNDRIP, which defies absolutely the Convention of Decolonization 1960. That's absolute. Russia is pissed off right now. They're not only pissed off at Canada, they're pissed off at Canadian Indigenous leaders. That's the truth. I could say anything, I could lie, but this isn't. This is about the truth. Russia is really pissed that they bring forward this resolution in 1960 that freed Indigenous women, absolutely. There were more things that should have happened and have happened, and why our courts were forced to make decisions when reality is our Canadian courts are King's Court. That power of Governor General and all Lieutenant Governors usurp your Supreme Court and your superior courts, giving all the power to the Prime Minister. So can you imagine an Indigenous person being ascended to Governor General and having to do whatever the Prime Minister tells them to do? That doesn't sound like a free First Nations people with self-determination, self-government, and seeing claims settled absolutely. That's never going to happen. And anyone who believes that doesn't really watch history, because Canada, they brag and present to the UN General Assembly a challenge to China's Uyghur Muslims, making outlandish claims. Well, we all get it because of the propaganda of media. All Canadians are seeing that. Most Canadians, China's evil, China's bad. Except for, if Canada was so vehement about that, why is it that everything you're wearing, everything in your pockets, everything around you, 95% of it's made in China? Why is that? Why is that? If China's so bad, why are they manufacturing 95% of the products we use today? How come when you go to the store, 95% of everything you buy is made in China? That hasn't changed. There's even companies using their name and product of Canada, but you find out absolutely manufactured in China. Purchased by that corporation, brought in, and then they redistribute it under their name. Shh, don't tell Canadians, keep it a secret. This is absolutely real, credible, and verifiable. Now, Russia is extremely angry because they have a dark past history as the USSR, something they've moved on from. They don't ever, and in their 85 regions, everybody, understand this. Putin has a constitution federally. You hear about that all the time. Autocratic Putin. Imagine he has 85 regions. Basically, the 50 states of America. Russia's a lot bigger than USA. They have 85 regions. Just like USA, the 50 states have each a constitution. Well, so do they in Russia. 85 constitutions, division of powers, 2/3 of the powers are given to those 85 regions. The 85 regions will not accept Russia moving forward with anything to do with the likes of UNDRIP. Again, everybody, I'm going to say this, and Indigenous people, Indigenous leaders need to understand this. This is a non-binding agreement, meaning it was put forward and voted down. It was vetoed, shot down, it's in the garbage can. Canada, again and again, the government of Canada, the Crown, picks these garbage can agreements out and says, we're going to impose this on all our people. All our people. So that means the Crown is in charge of administering and also controlling all aspects of UNDRIP in Canada. And there is no international stage you can go to on this agreement, because Canada is now the international stage. Again, it goes back to Canada's court system, which is absolutely Crown empowered. Indigenous people, regardless of what happens forward with UNDRIP, have nothing but Canada to go to. There is no international tribunal, stage, or court that will hear your case, because they're going to say, I'm sorry, that is an illegal, vetoed law. It's not international law. Get out. You've taken something that the Allies have told you to throw away, and you took it. And now Russia's sitting here looking at Canada and our First Nations. And Perry, the letter I'm writing to you, I now have to write not only for the ICC and Karim Khan going forward, but I also have to write now to Russia, along with the ICC, explaining crown colonial power embedded in our 1867 Constitution, that somehow it's not the fault of Indigenous, because those particular Indigenous leaders are in that crown. They are part of the corruption of Ottawa and Canada, assimilating their own people, committing genocide against their own people. Do you see the problematic here? Russia's looking at it like, we passed a world-binding law that said we wouldn't allow this on languages, this on the sexes, this on minority groups. First Nations are a minority group, and they are the first people of this country, completely victims of genocide for hundreds of years. Never mind Canada's day of Canada becoming. That started long before that, but it's continued as the country of Canada, and even worse, since 1945. And then again, 1952, massive historical date where no Canadian politician can walk away from the genocide now. Since 1952, everything that you've committed or voted or passed in law that absolutely restricted a race, absolutely forced assimilation of a race, removing culture, removing language, which Quebec does, everybody, which brings me back into even more for Indigenous. Under your UNDRIP, you said, in your UNDRIP Canada, your country Canada says, Francophones will now be Indigenous too. We just saw the unilateral declaration by none other than Justin Trudeau and Francois Legault. Indigenous is now going to belong to colonial France citizens who through colonialism took this country. Do you get it now? You can't go with the narrative and say that you're going to take a colonial power and give them Indigenous status in the country of Canada against the entire world and the 5 allies. Now, everybody, First Nations, Canadians, political leaders, this gets worse, everybody. This gets dramatically, dramatically worse. So Russia's pissed about that because they said, listen, the whole world voted for this. We gave you this law. We freed Indigenous women from servitudes in marriage and giving up their culture, their language, their rights to this country, Canada, that you're the first people of. Russia freed you from that, and now you're going to go slap right in Russia's face and say, listen, we're going to do UNDRIP instead. We decided, fuck you. Beat it. And your international law. So now Russia says, listen, now we have a problem. We have 5 regions going through independence right now. Massive civil war and strife. World powers influencing that. UK, France, USA, China, Russia. It's always like that. It's always like that, you guys. They fight each other for supply chains to weaken the other, to gain an upper advantage. They always go at each other. All 5. You can't really trust them in economics or in world stage events. None of them really, because they will all mix and match each other and not be completely honest with everybody. And sucker countries like Canada come forward, shooting their mouth off like we just watched June 22nd. And everybody, we're going to go through this exactly. It's all verifiable and backed up. It's 100% truth. Canada goes to the General Assembly. They go to the non-binding Human Rights Commission of the UN, and they say, China did this, this, this. Canada led that, everybody. That's their presentation. Bragging about having 44 out of 205 nations in the world backing them, and they say, likely we have the G7. I can tell you all, in absolute truth, on the day of the 28th, in none other than the most powerful UN organ in this entire world, the #1 source of international law, the judge, jury, and executioners in this world, all met on the 28th on the day of children's genocide. Every country spoke. You will not hear one country condemn China and the Uyghur Muslims. Not one of the P5. Can we go through this again, everybody? We had Woodward out of UK. Not a word said. All the other countries run down, nothing about China. USA, we had Greenfield. She ran down a whole bunch of countries, guns and kids. Not one word absolutely about China. USA, UK, France goes through all the atrocities. Again, not one word about China and the Uyghur Muslims. G7's right there. Uh-oh. We got 2 from G7. We got Five Eyes. Uh-oh. We got EU, Venice Commission, France. Uh-oh. Not one word. In fact, Venice Commission talks on behalf of Russia, backs up their claims. Uh-oh. China, Russia, do I even have to say another word, Canada? Those 5 countries together or individually sentence you. The only word we heard on the 28th, inside the ICC, 18 members of that, Canada, who can never get back there, had the worst vote ever recorded in Canadian history. After 80 years of always being a member, Stephen Harper got us thrown out on our ass, and Justin Trudeau couldn't get us back if his life depended on it. We had the worst vote in UN history for Canada, ever. What do you think the next time around is going to be? The world's going to say, condemn Canada straight to hell. We were presented on the 28th by none other than China, and this is a debate, everybody. You can go back and look. Children's Genocide 2021, UNSC annual presentation. China brings up Canada, and it was an open debate. How many countries debated China's assertion that Canada is fully genocidal against the First Nations in residential schools, meaning military police came in, the RCMP, beat, punished, raped, assaulted, and then stole children. People were maimed. Children were maimed. They were taken to residential schools where government officials and church employees raped, molested, and murdered thousands of Indigenous children. When we get into sexual assault alone, there's over 50,000 claims. And people can say whatever. This is Canada. We do census every year. Do you know you can look up everybody's marriage certificates of all the years in names? It's all there for you since the inception of Canada. Serious records. You can go through census. You can look at every law ever passed in Canada, both federally, provincially, and territorially. You can see what everybody voted, who voted what, when, and what was the absolute bread and butter of the law. I have them all. Do you know how many Canadian politicians are guilty of absolute genocide? Exactly the same thing as Nazi Germany. Medical experiments, kids taken to military facilities. Do you know how bad it is when you take children and you do stuff to children like that? We can't say, oh, UK did 1952 onward. That is all on absolutely 100% Canada's politicians, federally, provincially, and territorially. There's even municipal politicians under the provincial umbrella who participated. Gross physical sexual abuse, never mind the experimentation, never mind the clear murders. The reality is there are tens and tens of thousands. Witnessed evidence is there, unmarked graves, and no registration of those dead children who are there buried. Canadians, every year we know, and we have the records, every year, this is your class, there's 30 students missing out of all the classes. Did the Canadian government or the provincial governments or the municipal governments over those residential schools. As you know, education is provincial. Did anyone ever say, hey, where's these 30 students missing out of the 160 this year? And people go like this. No investigation, no nothing, because when you look at the legislation and laws that continue to get changed and adapted and added throughout the years, are genocidal, assimilation-based / absolute genocide. You can call it assimilation, but that wasn't what they did. They did genocide. And the stats came out year after year. We knew these children were missing. No investigation. Nothing presented to the people of Canada. The government said, quiet. They said, quiet. Don't worry about it. Nobody needs to know any of this stuff. We're just going to continue the genocide. Canadian people, the First Nations, will never know. All we know in stats is the reduction of the First Nations population over residential schools. It's so massive. We see Indigenous population growth, and then, vote. It goes like this. That's their population growth story. And then the many atrocities of releasing the children who didn't die, who didn't break and put on the cross and stand there like a zombie. Those that became monsters were sent back to their communities as the monsters created, weaponized against their own people. Not their fault. I'm not blaming First Nations. This will happen repeatedly in history. You can look at it. This indoctrination with the rape and the abuse turns people into animals, and then they release them back into their culture and society to help destroy it, to keep them down, impoverished, to keep the abuse cycle going forever. This isn't just done in Canada. This is done all over the world. All of those human rights atrocity countries were listed June 28th in the UNSC, and Canada was added to that list by China. Nobody, and I repeat, nobody, out of all UNSC reps, some of which are your Five Eyes, some of which are your G7, not one of them disputed the claim or at the same time put China up on the Uyghur situation. Not a one. Not a one. They all accepted Canada absolute. Canadians, your media is not going to tell you this. I think one senator spoke up and said, whoa, bear, slow down, government. We're in a lot of trouble here. China has tremendous more power over us. And what's happening in the highest ascension of laws in this world? The UNSC and all of its binding commissions, tribunals, councils, and subordinates have all not condemned China. In fact, they accepted Canada in the presentation. They took my presentation. That's reality. We're going to be making resolutions, but I need First Nations to know, and those tagged, share it. The biggest message here is you don't get a free pass just because you're First Nations. That world stage at that highest of highest levels, and then through the ICC, they don't care what race, religion, creed, color, sex you are. They care about what you did in breaching international law, and the gravest of grave is children's genocide, women and children's genocide, but children being absolutely the worst. Anybody breaking binding laws, doesn't matter, in the name of a crown, of the power of that government colonial system, you'll go down too. So I urge Indigenous leaders, there's a lot of them, especially the liberal ones, you're propagating genocide against your own people. You will not be given any kind of quarter. You won't get any kind of vindication because of your race. You won't. You won't. And you can keep presenting stuff. You can say, oh, forget all those countries. They can't do anything against us. That's a lie. That's a lie to every Canadian Indigenous person. They can and they will. We will get it through embargoes, sanctions, military intervention, and execution. But it's those first two that really destroy Canada. They really destroy Canada. And it happens all over the world. And if Canada thinks on that monumental day of presentations, being added to the likes of Somalia, Uganda, and there's so many rotten human rights violators we're all familiar with in the news. When Canada was and is added to that list. Australia, New Zealand, that's your... Look, Australia, New Zealand are with us. Australia and New Zealand are exactly like Canada. They exactly have nearly as bad of colonial embedments, maybe in some portions worse, than Canada. And they also have gross, sick, disturbing genocide in their history and being perpetuated today in the name of the Crown. A Crown power they no longer possess, or are not to possess, but they keep it. Colonialism's going down. It's been outlawed worldwide, and people have to start waking up. Indigenous leaders, wake up. Perry's going to get the letter. It's going to outline this, and he's also going to get added in the email to absolutely Russia, because Russia wants to know. And Perry, you're going to get those private emails, and you're going to decide if you're going to reply. Not me. I'm not First Nation, but you're the national chief. Now you reply to Russia, and you answer what I present to all three of you, and you answer back. Because I know where China is, and Russia does not want that Chinese communist idea that one race and one idea, one concept fits all. They don't. They welcome their minority groups. They're not happy with where Ukraine has just adopted similar, if not the exact same thing as Canada, a colonial nightmare with huge atrocity, which is, I just don't understand why First Nations are going this route. Like, how are you in bed with colonialism? Now, I hear you say things, Perry, that make sense, and then other times you go completely with the Crown, completely off the rails, and now you're going to have to answer to Russia, because I am not speaking as some kind of national chief here. You're going to, and if you don't answer, Russia's going to have their answer, and then they're going to know how to deal with you and all kinds of likes of First Nation leaders going forward, because I'm going to explain the Crown-embedded colonialism. Thanks, everybody. That's my video. Huge. Share, share, share. It's got to get out there. Bye now.